Welcome to this video guiding you through the Chariot Allegory, which comes to us from Plato's Phaedrus. Phaedrus is a wide-ranging work by Plato. It is not like some of the other dialogues that he records. It is not like clearly focused on investigating one specific question, but he does a lot of different things in this work. Before we get started talking about the Chariot Allegory, that little snippet from Phaedrus, let's define a few terms. I want you to make sure that you've got these down in your notes, that you clearly have defined these. We're going to be using the word allegory a lot. Allegory is a symbolic or fictional narrative, or even just tiny little story within a larger story that contains an additional, deeper, or higher meaning not stated explicitly in the text. Allegories may have multiple meanings and use material or physical things to describe and explain abstract ideas. Abstract ideas can be very difficult to talk about, so oftentimes great thinkers will use allegory to make it easier for us to think and talk about difficult abstract ideas. So what is explicit meaning and how is it different from implicit meaning? Well, explicit refers to meaning in a text or in words, meaning that is clear and has one meaning only. So if I'm reading an instruction manual, I'm looking for explicit meaning. How exactly do I put together this bookcase, for instance? I don't want to have to tease out the possible meanings. I want clear directions. That's an example where explicit writing is what I expect and what I love. But in a lot of philosophy and a lot of literature, we have a lot more implicit meaning. And implicit meaning refers to meaning that can be understood by the careful reader, but it is conveyed instead of clearly and with one meaning only, it is conveyed oftentimes by implication. So we need to be looking for, what does the Chariot Allegory imply is true? This allegory really is on the nature of the soul. And at the beginning of this selection, you have this, by the way, in your Plato packet, so you can follow along with these slides if you would like. This number here refers to the paragraph number. You can look on the slides. For each slide will have that paragraph number. The nature of the soul according to Plato. Of the nature of the soul, though her true form be ever a theme large and more than mortal discourse, let me speak briefly and in a figure. In other words, I'm going to talk about the nature of the soul using a figure and allegory. And let the figure be composite, a pair of winged horses and a charioteer. So we're talking about winged horses and a charioteer here, but what are we really talking about? The nature of the soul. There is mention of wings several times in this allegory. And we hear that the wing is the corporeal. Corporeal is another word for physical. The wing is the corporeal element which is most akin to the divine. The divine is beauty, wisdom, goodness, and the like. And by these the wing of the soul is nourished. So what nourishes the wings of these horses in this allegory? Things like beauty, wisdom, and goodness. And it grows apace when it feeds upon those things. But when fed upon evil and foulness and the opposite of good, wastes and falls away. So if we're looking at our Chariot Allegory, these horses are given wings, but these wings can only grow when they are nourished by the food of beauty, wisdom, and goodness, and they can actually fall off, and we can no longer have winged horses if they feed upon evil. So let's talk about what is true of the souls of mortals. And mortals are those of us who are human, those of us who die. Plato writes, that which follows God best and is likest to him lifts the head of the charioteer into the outer world and is carried round in the revolution, troubled indeed by the steeds, those are the horses, and with difficulty beholding the true being. The rest of the souls, the other mortal souls, are also longing after the upper world, and they all follow, but not being strong enough charioteers. They are carried round below the surface, plunging, treading on one another, each striving to be first. And many of them are lamed or have their wings broken through the ill driving of the charioteers, and all of them, after a fruitless toil, not having attained the mysteries of true being, go away and feed on opinion. So yes, the charioteer and the horses want to get into this higher realm, but is it possible? It may be possible, but it's very difficult. These horses are hard to drive. Also in this section regarding the allegory, we read that the reason why the souls exhibit this exceeding eagerness to behold the plane of truth, to try to get up there into that higher realm, is that pasturage is found there. Pasturage, where horses can feed. Pasturage is found there, which is suited to the highest part of the soul, and the wing on which the soul soars is nourished with this. So, of course, the charioteer and the horses want to reach that realm because that's where the food is. That's what helps them to stay there and be fit to be there. But it's hard for them to even reach that realm. So, what is this realm, by the way? Those of you who've read the cave allegory might have an inkling, but in Phaedrus we get also this description. Every soul of man has in the way of nature beheld true being. This was the condition of her passing into the form of man. In other words, before we were born, before we passed into the form of human, we were in this true realm, this realm of true being. But all souls do not easily recall the things of the other world. They may have seen them for a short time only, or they may have been unfortunate in their earthly lot, and they may have lost the memory of the holy things which they once saw. Few only retain an adequate remembrance of them, and they, when they behold here any image of that other world, are wrapped in amazement. So some people remember more of that other world than others do, but all of us have at least some recollection of that place that we are trying to get to. There is this element of humans, or if we want to call it the charioteer, knowing that that other realm is there and yet not being able to quite grasp it. The light of justice or temperance or any of the other higher ideals which are precious to souls in the earthly copies of them, so the light of justice or temperance or other high ideals that we love, are seen through a glass dimly. And they are few who, going to the images, behold in them the realities, and these only with difficulty. So we struggle. We can see things like justice. We can see things like virtues like temperance or goodness, but not clearly. It's like through a dim glass. So let's do a quick summary. What are the things we know about the soul at this point in the dialogue? What do we know about this allegory that Plato has told us he's going to use? Well, we know the soul is like a charioteer and two horses. That's the figure that he's using to explain the soul to us. We know that the wings of horses grow when they are fed upon the divine. We know the souls of mortals struggle to ascend to this higher realm, though they all want to. We know that up there in that higher realm are the plains of truth, which are nourishment for the wings. And we know that all souls have a dim memory of this higher realm from before birth. So let's return to the allegory then, and that's exactly what Plato does at this point. He returns back to this figure that he started with. As I said at the beginning of this tale, I divided each soul into three, 2 horses and a charioteer, and one of these horses was good, and the other bad. The division may remain, but I have not yet explained in what the goodness or badness of either consists, and to that I will proceed. The right-hand horse is upright and cleanly made. He has a lofty neck and an aquiline nose. His color is white and his eyes dark. He is a lover of honor and modesty and temperance, and the follower of true glory. He needs no touch of the whip, but is guided by word and admonishment only. That is the good horse, the right-hand horse. On the other hand, on the left hand, we have the dark horse. The other is a crooked lumbering animal put together anyhow. He has short, thick neck. He has flat face and of a dark color, with gray eyes and a blood-red complexion. The mate of insolence and pride, shag-eared and deaf, hardly yielding to whip and spur. The problem is when the dark horse acts certain ways when the soul beholds the object of its desire. We read, when the soul beholds the beloved, sees the beloved, this dark horse plunges and runs away, giving all manner of trouble to his companion and the charioteer. So when we're talking about the charioteer and the two horses and everything, there's also another part of this figure, and that is the fact that the soul is approaching the beloved. We're talking about a soul in love, really. And if in this scenario, in this situation, and now they, the charioteer and horses, are at the spot, and behold the flashing beauty of the beloved, which the charioteer sees. His memory is carried to the true beauty. Remember the thing that all humans remember? Whom he beholds in company with modesty, like an image placed upon a holy pedestal. He sees her, but he is afraid and falls backward in adoration, and by his fall is compelled to pull back on the reins. So the charioteer has this initial reaction to the beauty of his beloved. It reminds him of true beauty. He wants to approach it with modesty and temperance, and so he pulls back on those two horses. Here's where we get the part of this allegory that requires the taming of the dark horse. Both horses pull back, one willing, the other resisting. Of course, we know which one is going to follow the directions of the charioteer. It will be the white horse. The dark horse, on the other hand, is full of wrath and reproaches for charioteer and his fellow steed for want of courage and manhood. So the dark horse reproaches, is angry at the other horse and the charioteer. Finally, the dark horse makes the other two draw near to the beloved again, and when they are near, he stoops his head and puts up his tail and takes the bit in his teeth and pulls shamelessly. I don't know that much about horse behavior, but I think this is all bad horse behavior. The charioteer struggles even more to maintain control. He violently subdues the dark horse until finally the dark horse is tamed and humble and, importantly now, follows the will of the charioteer. So what just happened in this narrative? We had a charioteer and two horses, the image of the beloved, the charioteer witnessing this beloved, being reminded of true beauty, wanting to approach the beloved in a certain way that is modest and temperate. We have the dark horse not wanting to obey that kind of approach to the beloved, but finally being forced to. Once the dark horse is tamed and humbled and follows the will of the charioteer, when he sees the beautiful one, he is ready to die for fear. And from that time forward, the soul of the lover follows the beloved in modesty and holy fear. After this, their happiness depends on their self-control. If the better elements of the mind, which lead to order and philosophy, prevail, then they will pass their life here in happiness and harmony, and masters of themselves and orderly, enslaving the vicious and emancipating the virtuous elements of the soul. And when the end comes, they are light and winged for flight. So when we're talking about their happiness here, we're not talking about the beloved and the driver of the chariot. We're talking about the charioteer and the horses. We're talking about a single soul divided into three parts. And when can the soul be happy? When it is self-controlled. And what is the part of the soul that is supposed to be in charge? That is the charioteer. When order and philosophy prevail, that is by means of the charioteer, the driver. Then there is happiness and harmony. What does the charioteer have to enslave and take mastery over? Well, there's on the one hand the vicious, and on the other hand the virtuous. Which horse do you think represents the virtuous elements of the soul? The white horse. And which horse represents the vicious elements of the soul? The dark horse. Very good. There are other ways that people describe these two horses. Some of them describe the dark horse as the appetites, and the light horse as the desire for action. Some people liken the charioteer to the mind, which would make sense, the reason there. But however you choose to describe the charioteer and the two horses, you need to base that on what we saw in the text. So right now you need to take a minute and answer these discussion questions, or finish answering them, these comprehension questions, I mean. You should have started them as you were watching. Now you can come back and finish them. What is the chariot? What does the charioteer symbolize? What are the wings, the horses? These are the kinds of things that you need to start having some answers to if you're going to understand how Plato uses this allegory. in order to explain some truth about the human soul.